Is Cam Ward the best quarterback prospect in the 2025 NFL Draft? We're exploring that and more today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys, me and dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate you all being here very, very much. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5.
Joe, today on the show, we are doing a prospect deep dive on a couple of defensive linemen. Kenneth Grant, University of Michigan, I'll use air quotes here, other defensive tackle for Michigan. Nic Scourton, defensive lineman, Texas A&M, and a quarterback. It's about that time of year. We have a big enough body of work. I have a feeling Cam Ward and the University of Miami are going to play some more important football games, even though they don't have any more ranked opponents on the schedule right now. But we have a big enough sample size that we wanted to dive in here and get into quarterback Cam Ward, Nic Scourton, and Kenneth Grant.
Cam Ward, quarterback, Miami, 6'2", 223. Turns 23 in May, started his career at Incarnate Word, was there 2020 and 2021. Then he goes to Washington State, follows the offensive coordinator there. He's there 2022 and 2023, and now he's at Miami. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, didn't he originally declare for the draft and then winds up staying in school and going to Miami? And boy, it looks like a great decision. He's going to have over 50 starts in his career, with over 30 of them coming at the Power 5 level. And I enjoyed Mr. Cam Ward. Is he perfect? No. But I've enjoyed the blend of skill that is here, right? He does have good size. He's a very good athlete, has plus arm, and there's a playmaking instinct that he has that I'm interested in. And so does he always color inside the lines? Does he have some over-aggressive moments? Is there some fine-tuning? Yes. But as I continue to kind of talk about this line that I draw, that if you're above it, I think you have a chance to be a legitimate franchise quarterback in the NFL. Very easily do I get to a yes here on Cam Ward. So just kind of setting the table as we get into this conversation.
Yeah, I think there will be a few guys that cleared that yes threshold despite kind of the perception of the class. But as Joe mentioned, and the elements of Cam that are really exciting for me kind of stem from what he's able to do outside of structure, as Joe referenced, coloring outside the lines, the creativity, but also like it's never too fast for Cam in those moments where there's a rusher or you're hot or there's somebody coming at you free. That's not to say he doesn't take sacks, but more often than not, he gets out of those pressures and makes that first arriving pass rusher miss. And the ways in which he's able to keep his eyes down the field and access the field in those moments, like that's the gene that a lot of the great quarterbacks do have. And that doesn't guarantee you success, but I do feel like that is one of those more inherent, you either have it or you don't traits. And I think Cam has it in spades.
There's a nice trajectory here as well. Like a player that's played a lot of football, but it's not like you watch the same player over and over again. Right. I think you can see just a very nice incremental path for him to get better and better. And he's done so as he's leveled up in competition along the way. And obviously doing it at Miami and I think obviously playing the best football of his career. And I think he gives you a chance, man. I think we had a chance to meet him a few years ago and got a chance to get familiar with him. He seems like a great dude with the right type of makeup that's going to be a player that a franchise would be really happy to kind of have as a face, right, for their draft class, a face of their franchise.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it's a situation where, like, I think any quarterback is situation dependent. I wouldn't want to get Cam Ward and, like, he's not a candidate for, like, the Titans with Brian Callahan. Like, I don't think that's going to be a spot that I'd love. But man, if you're willing to kind of allow him to play his game and build in layers to accentuate what he can be and really have the right plan to develop him, I mean, he looks like a guy that could be one of those trucks, not a trailer, like a legit, all the tools, the reason that you're going to be winning football games, that your offense can be dynamic.
Let's be honest, that's what he is at Miami right now for the Hurricanes. I don't think that defense is particularly impressive, and that shouldn't be too hot of a take after they just gave up 45 points this past weekend to Louisville. But there's been instances in a number of those games where the defense has kind of put them in some holes. Cam has contributed at times to some of those holes. You consider the throw for the pick six against Cal, and very ill-advised decision, but he just comes back and keeps firing. And amidst all of the aggressiveness that he has, I think it is worth mentioning he's only lost one fumble this year. In the past 2 seasons combined, he'd lost 10 fumbles. So that was, I know, one of the big discussion points for Cam coming into Miami was the self-inflicted wounds and trying to do too much. And he's found a little bit more of a balance with it. And the fact that has come with playing with all new guys, coming into a new program in the process of doing that, I think is really impressive. And, the Canes have talent. They have the ability to run the ball. They have a great offensive line. They got some really promising skill players. They got a really reliable player that he really jives with in Xavier Restrepo. But it's not like he's throwing to what Joe Burrow threw to in 2019. You know what I mean? So for him to have addressed that element while still maintaining the identity of who he is as a player, I think is really impressive too.
You think it's fair to call him a chaos merchant? Does he like that? Or like, what about his process? Like his approach to any given snap? Like, do you think he wants that chaos? Do you think the reason maybe his time to throw is a little bit high is because he's more visual? Like, what are some of your contributing factors to that?
I think he's a little bit like Caleb in that regard, where, I actually think he's less chaos reliant than what Caleb was last year at USC.
Right.
I don't think he's bothered at all by either. I think you see him work concepts, but I think he's less chaos merchant and more big play hunter, big game hunter, if that makes sense. And continuing to walk the line with that, depending on what kind of situation you go into, you're not going to have guys that are particularly conducive to being a big play hunter. So I think that's the big thing with Cam when you project him to perceivably going to a bad team because he's going to get drafted early, is what does that look like? But I would describe him more as a big game hunter as compared to chaos merchant that relies on and overcompensates leaning into outside of structure stuff.
Yeah, and like you mentioned earlier, he's a guy that does kind of clean up his messes, or at least this year when I've been more dialed into him than ever before. Like, it might be a mistake there, but I feel like he always, he's a Lannister. He always pays his dues. Is that how it goes? Oh, pays his debt. Yeah. All right. Good quarterback here. I think there's 2 quarterbacks that I like so far: Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. I don't have them in that order. I have Ward above Sanders, and kind of interested in seeing if anybody wants to be QB3. Maybe that dude at LSU might be that guy.
That's kind of the wide open part of this. And I know, and a welcome back to Todd McShay. But he just launched the Todd McShay show over on the Ringer, and it was like a 16-month hiatus that he took from draft content. And both of us had a chance to watch his first show in the first 12 hours or so since it dropped. And they had that top of quarterback class conversation, and they kind of communicated the same thing: is there's a tier of 2 at the top. And right now it is Cam and Shedeur, and the race for QB3 feels like it's where this class really gets compelling because there's a lot of different names. But Cam, I'll tell you, depending on what Cam does down the stretch, and I know we got to get to break, Cam has a chance to be one of the more robust and impressive single season resumes that we've seen since Joe Burrow in 19. I think is where I would kind of draw the line. It's like what Joe did that season was incredible, right? We've had incredible Heisman winning seasons, and what Caleb Williams did the year that he won the Heisman, obviously, but like part of that is how you finish the run. And if Miami makes a run and Cam keeps doing the thing that he's done in realistically each of the last 3 games, which is will the team to win in the process and make the plays, I think that's where I'm less interested in how he finishes from like a style of play perspective, and I'm more interested in how he finishes from a how far can you carry this thing perspective.
Well, I mean, the last 3 games have been tight against Virginia Tech, Cal, and Louisville. So I know the schedule is not like daunting the rest of the way, but things have been tight. And then, I mean, this will surely be a playoff team, and we'll see him against some other teams. So,
right,
Cam Ward, get him on the radar, folks. Might be a real high draft pick here come next spring. All right, speaking of potential high draft picks, we'll talk about one of those here in just a moment. Nic Scourton, the edge from Texas A&M. Be sure to stick with us. Folks, purchasing tickets can be a stressful process, but it does not have to be, and it isn't if you have Gametime. Gametime is the fast and easy way to purchase tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. I love the app. It's easy to navigate. They give you flash deals. They give you a picture from your seat. You can turn on all-in pricing so you don't have any surprises with fees coming at the end of the purchase. And also they specialize in last-minute ticket specials, and so you can make that choice to attend an event right up into the day of it and get a great deal on a ticket. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike on other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick at least 2 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in when you pick more or less on them. PrizePicks is also a wonderful app that puts their members first. So all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get money in as quick as 15 minutes. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game.
All right, so we're next going to Nic Scourton, defensive lineman, probably an edge, but for some teams and some schemes, like he's a big cat there on the defensive lineman, formerly at Purdue, transferred to Texas A&M. Heavy hands is kind of the first thing that comes to mind with Nic Scourton, who hasn't had the best pressure profile this year. And like the sack, if you're going to look for just authentically the sacks, I think maybe you get a little put off by what the resume showcases this year. But 6'4", 285 pounds, transferred in, as we mentioned. The age listed, August 25th, 2024. So you're talking about just turning 21, provided he's in this upcoming draft class and is a part of that equation. So there's a lot of obvious things to like from a tools and developmental standpoint. And then you do watch the tape, and I think there's a lot of exciting things that he shows the ability to do.
Yeah, he actually turns 21 September 2025. So he just turned 20 in September. He's a young man, which makes it pretty exciting. I like the power, man. I think he's one of those guys that can shave angles and really play through contact and reset the line of scrimmage and play with just a really stout player at the point of attack. And I think that's how he wins, is able to disengage and find the football, and he's a high effort player. It's got a bit of a weird build, though, I will say, right? Like you mentioned, 6'4", 285. And then I don't know that he has like big time length either. And so I think for a power style tweener, inside outside type tweener, it's like, man, I wish he had just a little bit more length to really maximize that style of play. He's fascinating, man. I think you're seeing some of these undersized edge rushers come in and have some challenges, but maybe he's too much the other way. Like, I just wonder how dynamic of an athlete is this? You know, does he have enough juice to really be a high impact playmaker in the NFL? I think he'll be a good player in the NFL, but I at least get turned off a little bit by some of the top 10 evaluations that I see on him. And maybe that's relative to this class, as I find myself really thinking like it's missing a lot of top end talent. Maybe that in this type of class that pushes a player like him up. I think there's a clear role for what he can do. I just worry about the high end of the impact that he'll make, because I think he lacks length, and I'm not sure that he's like a super twitched up athlete.
I think that's fair. I also think there's a discussion to be had about where he best works in the NFL too. You know, are you authentically going to play him on the edge? Is he going to be a 5? Is he going to play inside more at the next level? Is there greater ceiling to tap into from a pass rush perspective if you reduce him and let him rush the B gaps more? Like, those are all things that I think give more possible avenues for success, but it requires some faith and, I don't say creativity, but like a vision for him as a player, depending on where he goes, because I don't think this is one of those foolproof guys that you just draft plug with whatever you run, and he's going to be able to deliver at a high level. I think he's somebody that you need to make sure that you have the right implementation vision for.
What do you think about his length?
I think it's fair he doesn't have 34 and a halves, right? Like, do I think it's sufficient? I think he has sufficient length, but sufficient length, more of a power style player, 285 pound, like, you know, we're kind of getting into like Solomon Thomas territory here.
That's where I'm at. Like, who are you pointing to that's like him that makes me say, oh yeah, you know, like, yeah, if he can be that, because he's got similar stuff going on. And like, I think a name that I think you and I kind of joked about this last week when we were briefly talking about it. I said, do you just draft him and hope that he's Cam Jordan? Well, Cam Jordan's got 35-inch arms.
Right.
Like, that's where I'm hung up on him, dude, because I have a hard time pointing to like, oh yeah, that's the guy. That's who it is. Is it Dwan Smoot? But Dwan Smoot's 20 pounds less. And is that a player you would pick high? I'm struggling.
I'm sitting here picking through like mock draftable for the athletic profile comparables. And I'm sitting on Solomon Thomas, who was 6'3", 275 with 33-inch arms.
I mean,
you know who from a build perspective, he's probably a little bit more like, but it was not all that similar in his role? Milton Williams. 6'3", 284, 31.5-inch arms. Disruptive player, but couldn't play chest to chest. I think Scorton gives you a little bit more in hand-to-hand combat than what Milton Williams did. But Milton's turned into a nice player for the Eagles as kind of a piece of their rotation inside. It's just, don't ask him to play the run in short yardage situations and stack double teams or like any of that kind of stuff.
When you said Solomon Thomas, I also started thinking of Kevin Givens. And it's like, oh, is he going to be the sub-package player in a Robert Saleh defense? You know, like those are players, yeah. Solomon Thomas and Kevin Givens. Like, to me, that's like, but what's the valuation on that? I think that's where I get hung up.
I don't know how bad does San Francisco season get?
Well, right. So
Saleh will be there next year as the DC.
Right.
And if they're picking in the teens, maybe.
That's kind of the type here. So, and I think the other side of this is like, okay, yeah, he is 20, turns 21 in September. Like, he's not going to get longer arms, but you
He
start
could go up or down from a weight perspective.
Sure, yeah, that's where I was going to go with it. It's like, do you want to see what this looks like at 270? Body transformations are tough for guys, right? Because I think like the way that you are and the way that you win is predicated on kind of that. But I don't. I think he's a little dangerous for me, but
I think I like his projection more inside than on the edge. Even if you run a penetration odd front and put him in the B gap, I just feel like he has enough power at 285 to collapse and win in those situations. The length and block disengagement skills are a little bit more comfortable with being in a phone booth more often as compared to being out on the edge, where if you get caught on a block, there's some bigger ramifications of that. Now, I think he has a nice pass rush profile, and you go back to some of the tape at Purdue, and you see a variety of ways to win.
I did. I like the Purdue tape better. I did.
So you want to cut him to 270 and play out on the edge? Do you want to I think he's a really fascinating chess piece, and I think we invoke some of the right kinds of names with different draft outcomes that have ranged for what Solomon was a top 5 pick, and Milton Williams is an interior guy, was a 3rd round pick. I don't know what Kevin Givens did he.
Yeah, I don't know when Kevin Givens
top 200 pick. Was Kevin Givens even a top 200 pick?
We need to know. We will find out literally right now. Kevin Givens was a UDFA in 2019.
Okay, so no. The answer is no. Got it. Great. So we just gave you a day 1, day 2, and
glad we can solve this for everybody. Thank you for listening.
Maybe somebody we need to circle back to. I think might be fair to see how the season plays out, because the transition to Texas A&M hasn't yielded kind of the pressure profile that we necessarily expected. So we're going to get into Kenneth Grant next. No transfer here, playing in the same scheme. Things look dramatically different on the offensive side of the ball for Michigan, but defensively, they still got some dudes. So we're going to get into Kenneth Grant next here on Locked On NFL Scouting. Stick with us.
Hey, NFL fans, you could start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And I'm telling you, this is the right time to get in on the action. Not only do you have all the sports are in play, right? We have the World Series, the NBA just got started, NHL, NFL's going, college football. It's all here for you. But I obviously love the NFL the most. But like as the season starts to move along, I feel like I'm figuring things out, right? The player props are becoming more logical to me, the over-unders. And so I can see, I had some struggles early in the year, but I am ramping up as we get more familiar with the league. So check it out. This deal is incredible. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's over at FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook.
Which brings us to Kenneth Grant, University of Michigan defensive tackle. His birthday's next week, looks like.
Yeah, I didn't have this one down, so
going to turn 21 next week. 6'3", 339 pounds, freakish athlete, very prominent presence, hard to miss. Was a part of that 1-2 punch combination of defensive tackles with Mason Graham, who really did a lot of the heavy lifting in the college football national championship game last year against Washington. I mean, they killed Washington in the middle last year.
Yeah.
It was him and Mason Graham wrecked shop. This guy's a little bit more the prototype. Where do you think the ceiling lies?
Well, I think that's what excites me is the ceiling. It's like a rotational player last year, of course, with Mason Graham and who's the defensive tackle that got drafted by the Bengals that I really liked. What's his name? Somebody's son, Chris Jenkins.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody's son. Thank you. Yeah, that's really good. You know what I meant, right? He was a former NFL player.
I knew what you meant.
Everybody's somebody's son. Numbers from Bruce Feldman's Freak List. 18.75 miles per hour on the gun. Remember, he's 340 pounds. Bench pressed 115-pound dumbbell 34 times on his right arm and 27 times on his left. Vertical jump of 29. And he did a Turkish get-up with a 150-pound dumbbell. I mean, I could barely do that without a dumbbell. Obviously, no one's asking me to play defensive line in the NFL. So I love that.
The 29-inch vert might be the most impressive number on that list, though.
Really,
for his stature, like
18.75 on the gun, though, that's pretty good too. That's what's exciting about him. Like, I don't know that it's all together for him right now, but boy, when he cranks it up, there's dominant moments. Like he can overwhelm you with power, and then when he can kind of get to an edge and disengage, and you see some closing speed for 340, dude, it's definitely there. So you mentioned the word ceiling, and I think that's what it's all about for him. I don't know that he's always dominant, but man, when he is, you can see like, all right, I can see impact. I can see him being a really good A-gap defender in the NFL.
I think that's the other part of it too. When you get into the athletic profile, there's guys that are this stature that have good pass rush productivity, but you really don't feel like it is very correlative to what it's going to look like in the NFL. I think about Deion Walker, the Kentucky kid this year.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like that for me, where you can have whatever splash plays in college you want. I don't see a NFL pass rush player in his profile. And you contrast that to Kenneth Grant. I think he's much more dynamic. I think he's much more fluid. I think he plays with better pad level. I think he plays with better power conversion because he can actually get his hinges and get up underneath you and railroad you back. It's like I could see this guy being a guy who does have passing down value, especially in contrast to a player at Kentucky and Deion Walker, who maybe has a more impressive and robust resume of like stat production right now. But I would take Kenneth Grant 10 times over 10 as the 330 plus interior defensive lineman in the first round of this year's draft class, with an expectation that he's going to play the snap volume and the snaps situationally that warrant a pick in that kind of stratosphere.
Yeah, I think that's extremely fair. And with a guy like Walker, like the power components just aren't there. And it's big boy fights, man. It's just big boy fights in the NFL, dude.
And plays hard, and you can respect that. But like
right.
Danny Shelton did that too. Siaki Ika did that too, right?
Boy.
Like,
yikes.
And he's bigger than those guys. He's got a bigger surface area than those guys.
Yeah, I don't know that we have like a DJ Reader type nose. Daquan Jones type player, Dalvin Tomlinson type player, sure. With, I think, more athleticism than either one of those two guys.
Yeah, I think that's the right. Like he has the separation ability too at the point of attack, right? He's not one of these guys that has the T-Rex stubby arms and just can't press and disengage. Yeah. Like he has that ability to take that single arm dumbbell bench press you were talking about and like bench press a center off. And then he has the lateral agility and mobility to play laterally and be it like an authentic two gap style of player, even if you're not just charging him with being a two gap nose. It's like, okay, just jolt up the center and read either side. Like he can get into a fit and then play back across the face of the guy.
Yeah, those Washington interior offensive linemen know all about those strikes and getting underneath and leveraging. And how beneficial is it going to be for Kenneth Grant to have like the Michigan influence in the NFL, like the Chargers and Minter over there and like Mike McDonald? I think like these
great landing spot for him if we're being
100%. Yeah, like if they could get him in the second round, we'll see where the Chargers ultimately wind up picking. I don't know what to make of that team, man. But yeah, certainly a need for them would make a lot of sense. But I mean, it'll make a lot of sense for a lot of teams. So I think his best football is still ahead of him, but I think he's an ascending player and showing that he can take on some snap volume this year. And I got the warm fuzzies a little bit watching Kenneth Grant, so it was nice to get that.
I'm glad we could not just do Cam Ward and hard questions with Scorton, but you got some warm and fuzzies. You know how I feel about big body dancing bears in the middle of a defensive line. It's my cup of tea. So he was definitely for me too. But that is going to do it for us here on Locked On NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He is Joe Marino. We appreciate you guys for checking out the show. As always, we hope you come back and see us again tomorrow, where we are previewing week 9, week 8.
Yeah.
It's week 9 of college football. But we're previewing week 8 of the 2024 NFL season, previewing all the games, making our picks. That's tomorrow. We hope you will join us. Kyle Crabbs, Joe Marino. Appreciate you guys. Locked On Network. It's your teams every day. Come on back. See us again soon.